Hi, hello everybody. Welcome to next episode of Disruption Talks by Netguru. My name is Paula Sztainwald. I'm a product manager and I'll be hosting today's episode. Today with me is going to be Johnny Quach. Hi, Johnny.
Hey, Paula, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's very rainy in Lisbon, Portugal, where I live.
Good, very good. Here is also very rainy and cloudy, so I feel you. Listen, I also want to introduce you by your position, but I need some support from your LinkedIn profile because it's quite a position. So
Okay.
let me get into it. So you're working in Hostelworld. You have a position of CPO and CMO. So together, this is a growth lead. And you lead the following teams: product management, data science, design, brand, and growth, right? Lucky five, correct?
Yeah, it's probably a few more other things in there, but yeah, that's the over-encompassing area. But I would say the easiest way to think about it is anything consumer-facing and partner-facing, the product and the general experience, and every part of that experience, from the copywriting to the design to the actual engineering of it, to releasing it to marketing. All that falls under me in terms of consumer experience and anything that falls nicely into that general bucket.
Johnny, that sounds very nice, but like the first question that pops to my mind is like, how does your day look like? With two C-level positions, with 5 and more teams to handle, how does it look like? How do you handle in a rainy day in Lisbon?
I mean, I don't know if it's like the best way, but I can kind of explain how I try to organize my thoughts. I think at the very high level, I think most companies, I would say maybe even 97% of companies that have existed for the last like 60 years. We have always said that in a business, you will need like some managers, you will need HR, you will need finance, you need marketing. And then I think probably in, I don't know, for 70s and 90s, they're like, oh, you actually need a technology department. And when we started, when companies started adding engineering teams to the company, that created a new department that didn't exist before, just like how there's cybersecurity teams now and that didn't exist before. And then through like whatever time, then they're like, oh yeah, but you got a bunch of engineers who's gonna like help them define what to work on. Are they gonna decide? No, the CEO just tell them what to do. And that was really like the Google thing for a while. And then they're like, oh, actually, there's this role called product management, and then that sits nicely next to this role, and da da da. So then when you had maybe in 2000s and 90s, it's like you had marketing, product management, engineering, HR, finance, operations, sales, and executive. And I think that is not an evolution. What that is an addition. So you just keep adding new departments into company. But I don't think there's ever been a lot of thought, like globally, to go, actually, do we need, and are any of these departments actually doing the same thing? And I think that's the first kind of way that this is more efficient than most people would imagine when they read what I do. And I think marketing is a very vast topic, and I wouldn't say this covers all of it, but I think the majority of marketing in tech companies these days is heavily a mathematics game and heavily an engineering problem to solve. And what I mean by that is, if you look at any company, a tech company, maybe even e-commerce, non-tech, physical goods, the majority of their costs, not all, but a major, is advertising. Advertising in the modern sense is not like, let's come on with the coolest ad and write the best copy and have a good photo. There's a place for that, and there is effectiveness in doing that. But the majority of the kind of ad spend that we're talking about is Google and algorithmic and targeting. And that is 100% a technical and strategic and like engineering problem to solve. So if you have a strong team that really understands how to solve problems from an engineering perspective, that is almost a very different class, a different style of marketing than you had in the past. And so why I say all this is, it's a long way of saying that product and marketing have the exact same goals, which is to acquire customers. And I think in a more traditional sense, product managers might draw like a silo and be like, well, actually, no, you find the customers. We'll just give them a great experience. And I don't know if you've ever worked at a company, or anybody who's listening has worked at a company where that was the case. It's like the most annoying relationship in the world, because you're constantly at odds on priorities and you never align on anything. But what you have seen in some companies, not all companies, but I would say something like 17% of tech companies in the world, that is starting to be very clear that product management teams are also have to be responsible for growing revenue, growing customers, and making impact on the business. Not just, I'm going to build a customer experience, I'm the voice of the customer, go away marketing, go away sales. That's just not how businesses run. And I think all this evolved because engineering as a function joined organizations, and the way engineers work through agile methodology, through Scrum, for whatever, through small teams, for iteration, that working process is so effective that it's starting to take over pretty much the entire organization. And so you'll see a lot of this, I call it evolution of departmentization. And I think that's starting to break down. People are rethinking, well, is finance and HR, is that two teams? Is it one team? Does it have to be two teams? And all these things will overlap across every different department over time. And so that's kind of how I ended my role. And the way I handle this is, it's actually all the same problems. It's actually easier if one person manages all of it, because you never have conflicting priorities. It's always one directional. And so that's how I handle it. Of course, the natural thing is you just have really strong people that can take a very big piece of real estate and just own it, And on top of that, I spent maybe the first 2 years of working at Hostelworld really spending about 30 minutes an hour on each major topic and then just repeating it every day. I've changed that to now I don't work on anything except one area of the business for 3 hours straight on a single day. So Monday is X, Tuesday is Y, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's been more effective because going deep has a stronger compounding effect long term. And so I find that to be my new way of being comfortable with the wider area of stuff I need to manage.
Wow.
That's a very long answer for a very simple question. Sorry.
It's very comprehensive. And I'm really looking into going into more details about like the evolution of the departments that you just described, because today's episode is going to be mainly about how to combine product and growth strategies. So looking forward to that. But one question before we get into it, like I can imagine that this is how your day looks like right now. And this is very different from how your day looked like when you first got into product. Do you recall your first position when you got into product job, like how your day looked like then? How did you even end up there? I'm really curious always about asking people how did they end up into product, because it's not usually the position that dream about when you're in kindergarten, right? Like it's not something like that. So how do people end up there? How did you end up in product?
I think you're absolutely correct, because when I was in elementary school, I wanted to be like a comic book artist. That was like my dream. I wanted to be like an animator, or I wanted to draw like monsters for a living. And like all through elementary school, middle school, and high school, I was not very like academically smart. I was like pretty bad at math, pretty poor vocabulary, not great at grammar, not good at science, physics, but I was I became very good at drawing because I thought I was good. So I just kept drawing. So I got better. So that was like, oh, I'm going to be an artist. And then when I started college, there wasn't like a degree called like be an artist degree. And there were, but it's not it's more like fine art and all this stuff. So I ended up joining a school where they would teach me how to 3D animate video games and draw monsters for video games. And I thought that was like the coolest thing in the entire universe. So when I graduated, I actually worked in video games for a little bit. And then I ended up working in fashion, because the actual tool set back in the days, when I say back in the days, like 2000s, it's Photoshop, it's Illustrator. So if you're familiar with those tools, you can actually create anything. And so, yeah, I worked in fashion for a while, which is a bit random. Worked there for like maybe 10 years or so. Worked mostly for skate surf companies. And so how all this tech product management and this kind of stuff is, it's actually because at the end of my career in fashion, I was like, I think I'm going to play poker for a living because everyone was playing poker. And I was like, but I like video games and I can make a living playing poker. So I'll play poker for a living. So I started playing poker for a living. And the exact same month, I started playing poker for a living. The iPhone came out, and that changed like the entire universe. And at that time I was thinking to myself, well, I know how to build a Flash website because I built them and worked on them in fashion. So I said, mobile apps must be like little websites. Okay, I could build lots of them. And so I had a really good friend move to China. And then at that time, China had very inexpensive developers. So we started hiring developers there. We started building our own, what you would call these days, startups or whatever, products. We just thought they were cool little websites on phones. And yeah, so we built a ton of stuff. We built a cloud storage company, very similar to Dropbox, because Dropbox was banned in China. We built a group photo album product. And then finally, we built a very multifunctional multimedia chatting app. So you could send animated emoticons, you could send photos, you could use geolocation, you could add your friends, pretty much what everyone uses these days. But no one used it when we launched it. No one cared. I think we had like 3,000 users, and we like what the heck? No one's using it. It's just because the period was so different. People didn't have bandwidth, and it was just a very different thing. Anyways, after all that, there was this company called Match.com. Match.com, they own Tinder, they own OkCupid, they own Hinge, they own pretty much all the more significant dating companies in the world at the time. And I joined as a senior product manager. And I remember during my interview, it was like really embarrassing because I applied for this job and I had no idea what it did. And so I had to Google all the terminology. I had to Google, literally, I Googled what is a KPI, what is a PRD. Funny enough, no one cares what that is because no one actually uses many of those. So I Googled all these terminologies, and I was so and I'm not a shy person, but I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. But yeah, I Googled it, and it felt really comfortable because I was just thinking, I know what that is. I looked at things like that. I think about things like that. I just don't have the vocabulary. So I just practiced my vocabulary. And during the interview process, it's very apparent that I didn't have a background in this. I came from a design background, and I tried to build some companies. And that was a really positive interview. And that's how I started working in product management. And almost immediately, I was owning the main funnel, the profile page and the search page. And it was eye-opening. It was such a beautiful thing. I have never in my life been like, wow, this is the way at least Match looked at product management, or just looked at their business, was so data-driven and so analytical and just not by intuition. And it was just a beautiful thing to see so much data, so much experimentation, a well-run process for that. And it just clicked. And I think experimentation and experimenting to create growth, it's part analytical science, but there was also part like an art to it, where you have a really strong intuition of what the problem is someone has experienced. So you start thinking of hypothesis, and then that's what leads you to these more technical experiments. And yeah, the 2.5 years or 2 years I worked there, it was all that. All I did was run experiments, understand what's going on, try to understand behaviors. And I had to say that was so formidable, because that is the majority of how my brain still functions. It's very, very analytical. And so, yeah, from there, I worked at some other companies. I ended up moving to Berlin. I worked at a company called Rocket Internet, building companies. Then I worked at a company called AirHelp, a Y Combinator company. And now I've been at Hostelworld. And really, through that path, it's not very different. It's actually very much the same thing from the stuff I even learned in college about video game design. And that was always just about Do you understand what the problem you're trying to solve is? And do you have objective truth that exists versus your feeling that it exists, and then you try to prove that? And so just constantly reevaluating that, I think, is the main skill set. And that's how I ended up in product management. It was not natural. It wasn't a driven thing, but it feels like the right parts of my brain would work. And turns out I am quite academic. I just never found a topic or subject matter that felt so real world to me, because studying in college is very different than actually doing work at a company. It just felt so different, almost turned on immediately overnight.
Wow. I think I've never heard anybody like talking so nicely about product management, like with such a passion, like eye-opening experience. Like it makes me want to become a product manager like again. But what you mentioned was like that being a product manager is partially being data-driven, but also partially being intuition-driven, right?
Yeah,
I always am interested in people like in product manager sharing their opinion about like what's the ratio.
Yeah.
Between,
yeah. I think so. I would say the ratio, I don't know if there's an accurate one. And I think depending on the problem set, you want to shift that, right, in terms of like mix. So I think it also depends on where you are in your decision-making journey. So let's assume that in a scenario where your company, your boss, whatever, is like, okay, I need you to increase X metric or solve Y problem. If you're trying to increase X metric, most likely you're going to do it by releasing a feature or making a change to some part of the user experience. The question is, what part of the user experience is going to trigger enough impact for that metric to move, whatever your goal is. The first part of your process is trying to understand, well, what is happening right now in the present? What is actually going on? So let's say you want to get one person from step A to step B. And what you're trying to understand is, okay, first of all, how many people move from step A for step B? First question. Okay, maybe it's 99%. Okay, well, this is stupid. Like, can't really increase it much better. But if it's like, let's say 2%, I was like, oh my God, like 98% of people are not moving past this step. Okay, let's understand why. And that's the first piece, is you're painting the reality of the situation with data. You're just going, okay, what is it that we know without like any opinion? What is a fact? The fact is 98% of people leave this page. But when you get to the question of why they leave this page, data in terms of tracking and user behavior and this stuff, in some scenarios can only get you so far. And sometimes you just don't have the sophistication of that much tracking. That's very common as well. But let's say you had very sophisticated tracking. You were recording random screens. You could see drop-off. You could see people interacting else. You figured it all out and all this stuff. And you still cannot figure out why people don't move. That is the part where you start to rely on your ability to visualize the experience the user is going through in the user's mindset. And the reason I'm very precise in that sentence is it's very easy for you to visualize the flow because you could go through it yourself. But when you're going through yourself, you are most definitely your intelligent self, knowing everything of how all this works. You know where all the errors are, so you know where the buttons, and you naturally scroll through it. But for a person, and I think this is often the case, it's an old thing, but most people do not know how anything works on the internet. And that simple statement is true 99% of all population who visit any website, right? They're just like, well, I don't know how the form works and all this stuff. And so I think it's just critical that you're using data to form the shared perspective of the problem and what the present reality is, but you rely heavily on quote unquote your intuition. I don't know if that's the right word, but let's say your ability to creatively think through as a different person or act it out in your head going, okay, I'm here, I feel this way, I'm focused on this problem, and just going through that, that's the art piece. And what that does is it doesn't give you the solution. It gives you a bunch of potential hypotheses that might be true. And then you go back to creating the right experiment to validate that. And then once again, you analyze the data to go, is that true now that I've changed it? So I think it's not so much like what's the mix. I think it's more of a sequencing, which is like data, intuition, data to validate your intuition. And that's the loop you keep going in. And you could probably do that loop in mini loops or massive loops, but as a company, you do that constantly. So that's what's really happening, is data to intuition as a loop.
Sounds about right. You also mentioned, I think, what's called empathy, right? Like feeling what your user is experiencing and so on. Like the challenging times that we've been facing recently, COVID pandemic for sure, right? I think this is something that hit hospitality industry very heavily, probably, right?
Yeah.
And Hostelworld is there. Can you share how the pandemic influenced Hostelworld? Like, how did you react to COVID? How did you manage to stay on top?
I think, yeah. So obviously it's a fairly long story, but I will kind of cover just the most high level points of how we went from there to here. I mean, it doesn't hurt to really set the scene, because I think, yeah, most people obviously experience COVID in some way. I think travel companies experienced it in a much more dramatic and stretched out way. There were companies that experienced it for like a few weeks and all they had the opposite trajectory, like upwards. We had like a crash and then at the bottom for like a good year, 2 years. And I mean, I'll talk about, let's say, like 3 chapters: the beginning, the middle, and then the present. At the beginning, it was like, oh my God, freak out. Everybody freak out. And the funny thing about scenarios where you're naturally supposed to freak out is like it's the most important thing to stay calm. Because the natural thing is to freak out, but the best thing you can do is not freak out. And so it was a lot of like, okay, everybody, let's not freak out. It was just fascinating to stare at a screen that said, like you're plus 5% year over year, and then the next minute would be negative 5% year over year, and then next day would be negative 32%. And then you're thinking to yourself, how low is this going to go? And then it goes negative 60. And you're thinking, okay, that's really bad. And then you're at negative 10. And it just like, you're like, what is going on? And it gets to the point where you're like, these numbers don't even make sense anymore. And so your brain can't even process what is happening because it happened literally over a few days. Everything the whole world just shut down and went crazy. So that was the first chapter. And of course, immediately once you do that, you have to start going to, okay, cost reduction mode. All right, what are we spending on products, on SaaS products, on partnerships? What are we spending? What can we cut back on? Who can we call? And you just start picking up the phone. And as a leader, you're just constantly doing this stuff. Then you're revisiting all the things you've committed to for next year and go, okay, what do we have to stop right now? And then you just pick out all the things that have the highest confidence and you kill everything else. And typically this is like 5%. So you're killing like 95% of projects. Everything's going to hold until we resolve this. And so that is chapter 1, which is preparing for, I would say. The second part, which is the middle part of the story, is, okay, now that the world is in a steady state, a negative steady state, but it is steady-ish, right? It's not going like this. It's going like this. That gives you a bit of zen and calm, to be calm and to go, okay, from day to day, it's negative, but it's not changing. So now what will you use this time for? And for us, and I think many companies have a similar answer, but we got to go, oh, wow, all the 95% of things we stopped working on, why do we work on in the first place? Oh my God. Like, why did we even commit that time? And so what you do is you just rethink your ability to make decisions. And you go, okay, well, how did we get to the point where we're working on so many things that actually didn't matter? And how did we get to the point where we're spending so much money on things that weren't really impactful? And then what happens is you rebuild your decision-making process as an organization. And I think for some companies, it happens very naturally. For some, it was very strong sentiment to do it. So for us, we rebuilt the way we were thinking about decision-making. And that gave us the ability to go, okay, well, what is it that we need to focus on for the next 5 years? And we go, okay, what are teams that need to do it? What are things that don't make sense? And you just start optimizing your company's size, your spend, all that stuff to just fit the current space that you're going with a little optimism of what the future looks like. And so that was about 2 years, right? It was middle of 2020, and then all the way to probably end of 2021. And 2021 November was when Omicron hit. So everybody's like, oh my God, not again. And then the cycle starts over. You go, okay, but hey. And the funny thing is that if you were in the hospital at that time, you would just be like, everybody's like, hey, we've been here before. We know what to do. Like, we know the process. And so it was very calm. It was very zen. I mean, it was a little stressful, but everybody was very zen. We knew how to make decisions. We formed a habit of making good decisions based on dynamic variables. So then we get into 2021, 22, and things started looking better within the first 6 weeks. Like people are like, let's travel. And people are like, I don't care about Omicron, whatever. And it's just, everything started picking up. And so, and to be fair, obviously over the last 2 years, we built a lot of things that improved the experience, that we can dramatically see change. And so that finally gave us the opportunity in April 2022 to actually launch the strategy I joined the company to build in 2020. So we actually released a bunch of new apps. We released a new Android app, a new iOS app. We rebuilt our website. We had all these new features to help travelers meet other travelers. And we just pivoted to this different strategy that we've been wanting to do for a good 3-4 years. And in 2022, we were given the opportunity that because we had that good momentum in the beginning of the year. And we just took that. And now it's just a compounding effect of people feeling a little more normalized about travel. Plus, we just have a significantly better user experience with significantly better everything across the board. So in general, if you take a snapshot of 2019 beginning to now, we have a similar size business. We have about 97% of revenue in 2019, which is fantastic. But what's more impressive, if you look at the company, we are just very different. We're a little leaner. We're a lot smaller in size. We don't have as many people. We have less teams. We have more generalist managers that own very different roles. We have completely different organization. We have completely different tech stack. We have a different completely product offering. And the most critical thing is we make decisions very differently. And that has been how we are now where we are, which is, I would say, considering the sentiment of the general tech industry, we're in a very positive position. We're quite happy with where we are right now. And that brings us today.
Well, it makes me so amazed about how, amazed overall about people, not only in our industry, but overall in the world, how people handle something that is so negative, so hard to overall to handle. And after months comes up with saying, we're in a good place. Actually, we can say that we're even in a better place that we've been because of the hard time we went through. So really kudos to Hostelworld, to all of you there who made the change possible. You mentioned new stuff coming, right? I know there's one thing that's very exciting, Soul System, if I'm correct. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, it's the reason I joined Hostelworld in the first place. When I first started talking to Hostelworld, I looked up the company, of course, and many people know of it, but Hostelworld is a two-sided marketplace. It's an online travel agency. So you can go on Hostelworld, you can look for a hostel in probably any major city in the world. You can find a place to stay and you can book it. And that's usually the end of the experience. If you think about your entire relationship with any sites where you book a flight or a hotel, for example, Skyscanner or Bookings.com or whatever, that is typically your entire experience and you never think about the company again. And the other kind of interesting point is there is zero brand loyalty for this, right? You will go where the price is better. That's typically how people think. And so I was like, well, that's not fascinating to me. It's not very innovative business. There's not much there for me to be excited about. So, but the beauty of it is that when the CEO and me were during our interview process, we were talking about, from a vision standpoint, where is the opportunity for this company to be really interesting? And so then we looked at, well, what is the base foundation that exists in Hostelworld now? So you have a very healthy business with healthy DM with direct margin. And you have a bunch of travelers, but the special thing about it is it's one kind of traveler. It's a very specific younger traveler that is social. And if you think about any single company in the world where people make a flight booking or hotel booking, if you took a snapshot of their age demographic and their traveler behavior, it's probably very mixed. Ours is very consolidated into a very specific profile. And that profile is a young millennial-esque, a little younger sometimes, who is very social. And close to half of our travelers are solo travelers. And we go, okay. So if we send a survey to our customers and go, hey, after you booked your hostel, what would be the highest priority thing for you? What's important? And you'll get about a bunch of answers, and two things come up all the time. One, I'd like to meet other people when I'm there. I'm going there alone and I want to meet other people, and I want to probably meet other people similar to my age and into the same things. Two, stuff to do. That's simple. Where do I eat? Where do I go? Where do I get a drink? What's cool to see? So combine those two things and you go, well, the problem statement here is you have a bunch of people who book the trip and have no way to really connect with other people, which is why they're staying in hostels in the first place. It's because naturally there's a density of a network inside of a hostel. And so you start thinking for all this stuff and you're going, it's interesting when you really understand the problem and you're really able to depict exactly what's going on, the solutions to anything become so stupid obvious. So you hear all this stuff. At this point, everybody is probably going, should build something where other people can meet other people easier, right? It's just like if you really spend the time to just be that person and go through it, it'll just be obvious what you should build. So obviously, what we should build is we should build a bunch of features that make it easy for people to meet each other. So we spent about a good year building everything. And in April this year, we released what we call the Solo system, which is we rebuilt our iOS app, Android app, and our web app. And within the mobile native apps, now when you make a booking, we give you a bunch of interesting features. So the first piece is when you're searching for a room on the Hostelworld app right now, and let's say you look up London, and we'll show you in every single hostel how many people are going to be in that hostel on that day that you're going to book. On the day of your trip, I'm going to show you how many people are going to be in the hostel from Hostelworld. So if you open up like the app now and you look for it, there's probably like a few hundred people in each hostel. So you're thinking, wow, if I go there, there's already 300 people in this app that's there in the same time I'm going to be there. After you book, what we will do is then 14 days before your check-in day, we spin up a chat room of everyone in the hostel so you can talk before you all actually get there. And we also spin up different chat rooms based on what you're interested in. So for example, you go, I like sightseeing, or I want to go for drinks and dance floors, or I want to take a walk. We have different chats for that for everyone in the city. So you're going to be put into multiple different chat groups who have interest in doing different things. And what happens is people start planning what they're going to do before they get there. And what happens is after that, 3 days after you check out, we then kick everybody out of the chat room. So essentially what we're doing is creating temporary social networks that spin up every time you travel. And you will always have people there because we always have people in almost every single hostel. So that's kind of the whole thing in a general sense. And what we're doing, we're building additional things to further that. So in London and Lisbon, we have a feature called Link Ups, which is just an ability for someone to create an event and then other people in the city will join. And that's a very spontaneous thing. We also do random kind of things. We call them surprise parties. So we just send a push notification to like everybody in the city, be like, go here and there's a free party for you. So we're introducing all these little things and we're validating what works and we're testing them. And when they're really popular, we start to roll them out. So right now we're in the process of building the next iteration of significant features for next year. But the numbers have been really insane and we're really seeing an uptake in the usage. We're really seeing an uptake in people using it and just general behavior towards the Hostelworld app, because now they're opening it even when they're not booking, which is something no travel company has ever done, which is create an experience for someone to use their travel app when they're not looking for an accommodation in the future. And so that's the thing we're really excited for, and that's what we launched this year.
Sounds really cool. Like, sounds like you managed to build the engagement with the brand that you said at the beginning was none. So it's such a huge change. Let's get back to like the first weeks or even whatever days when you were thinking about this, launching this, and when you were starting to formulate some kind of product and growth strategy, right, for Solo System. So on one hand, we have the users acquisition, the retention, like the stuff that you mentioned, product and marketing has the common goals together. But there's also the profitability, right, to getting there quickly as much as possible. And so can you share like how did you approach like creating this strategy, like both growth and product that combined all of it at once?
Okay. I think it's the original problem statement I stated earlier was the hardest thing about travel and booking businesses is that the brand loyalty is quite low. And so in a tactical sense, just going, what is it that we want people to do and think of when they interact with Hostelworld? And one of the main things I was thinking is that there's just no reason to open the app. So there's no reason to think about us ever, unless you're actually at the moment in which you're looking for a room, right? And playing back from that, you're just going, well, what are the things that we can build that will get people to open the app? Number one, you're opening the app, so you're getting hit with the brand. So your quote unquote brand loyalty, I wouldn't say it goes up, but your frequency of seeing the brand definitely has an impact on your behavior when you are about to book. Mm-hmm. And every single business that exists, there is something I call the magic point, which I didn't coin for it, but someone created it. And some people call it tipping point, some people call it the aha moment. But it's the moment in which someone does something, an action in your app that turns them from a normal user to a very valuable user. Mm-hmm. And the hypothesis we had was that must mean that, like, when you travel, if you think about all the best trips you've ever had, I'm pretty sure for a lot of people, the most memorable travel experiences typically is when they meet someone, or they're with someone, or they go somewhere and they bump into this person, or like these kind of things. They really make those travel experiences, especially when you're in your 20s or your 30s. And if that is the magic moment, how do we work backwards from that and get that to happen more frequently? And I truly believe, as a company, if you're creating and getting a lot of people to this magic moment, you create a much better experience, and that will naturally create loyalty, and that will naturally create a very positive sentiment over time. So that seems so simple, just get to that point, but working backwards to build all the features and the right buttons and the right copy, just to get to the point where you do all the things that get you to meet more people, that didn't create more stronger travel experiences and memories. That's the game. And if I were to simplify every single decision we make, it's just, can we get people faster there? Can we move people from this point to meeting someone, having a great memory when they travel? That would be kind of how we think about everything, from marketing to product, whatever. And yeah, so that's kind of how I think about the engagement point. It's not so much like I want people to open the app a lot. It's that I want them to open enough so that they actually end up meeting someone that they have a great time with in Lisbon or in London or whatever. And later they're going, that was fantastic. Like, I cannot wait to recreate that moment again. And then finding ways to just make that easier every time. That's the key, I think.
So it sounds like what's driving the growth and product strategy that you worked on is like bringing the value to the users, right? Like the fastest possible.
Yeah.
I see we have a question from the audience here. So maybe let's get one. I see a question from Mary, and she's asking, what's key to accelerating digital in being faster than others? Basically, what would you say is crucial to a digital acceleration mindset?
What's key to accelerating digital and being faster than others? Basically, what would you say is crucial to digital accelerating mindsets? Yeah. Okay. So there's a few questions there. So let me try to answer it in the right order. So what is the key to accelerating digital? I think oftentimes the only thing that really stops a company from releasing more features quickly that have impact on the customer experience, there's typically like two kinds of blockers. The first kind is technical ones. And that is just having a platform that's hard to work with, or having a platform that's complicated, having a platform no one understands. That's a big part of it. And I'd say for a lot of companies, that's one of the main reasons. It's because you have quite a lot of legacy code or a monolith that you can't deal with, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the main thing. There is no easy way to resolve that except to rebuild that thing over time, or start to decommission it and break it down to multiple pieces. These are all really known and common strategies, but the issue there is that it's not overnight. It's not even 6 months. It could be a 2-year project just to get that off the ground. And to continue to invest into something for 2 years as a tech company that's trying to move fast, it's very hard. That's actually a very unnatural behavior, is to think that long-term for something. But all the best companies and all the biggest tech companies have reinvested in this platform modernization multiple times for their existence. Facebook, Google, Amazon, whatever. They constantly try to make their operating system, their development platform, more efficient so they can actually ship faster features in the future. And that's why you read stories about these companies, they can release a feature within a week. That's a very significant one, right? So that's the first piece. There is no magic soft statement about tech debt. You have to rebuild it or kill it, and you have to just constantly work on that. And that is a long investment, and staying focused is the key. The second piece is internal. Typically, it's because of dependencies. People depend on other teams to do a part of a piece of work that someone else needs to get done. A simple example is, I'm a product manager. I like to build feature X. I write the specs, and Mr. Engineer can go, all right, I'll start work on it. But we don't have designs. Okay, need a designer. Oh, we only have one designer and 4 teams. That's it. That's already like one major blocker. Take the same problem, repeat it for every single role. QA, engineering, product management, copywriting, design, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything requires everyone to do it, typically. And that naturally creates dependencies. And that is the main reason things get very slow. So how we resolve this, and how I think, and this is my current opinion, I think it is the most efficient way to work, is you want to cut the company up into major areas of real estate, general topics. And what you really want to do is start building these teams in a very cross-functional way. So you have all those skill sets inside of a group. So you want to get to a point, it can never be 100%, but you want to get to a point where any group can 85 to 90% of the time do whatever they want without a lot of dependencies. There should be a strategic alignment on what it is you're trying to accomplish. But generally speaking, technically, when you're executing, you shouldn't need a lot of input from everyone. And speeding up acceleration really means speeding up acceleration for individual teams in a company, because that is when you feel the velocity actually changes. There's no way to speed up a whole company. There's multiple things going on, but giving certain autonomous teams full capability to go from 0 to 1, that's the trick. So think about, and so the tactical and the actual advice I'll give in terms of if you want to take an action is cut a team out, cut a small team of 6 people out, give them the ability to do a very wide range of skill sets and just do a wide range of actions, which is they can design, they can write code, they can QA, they can product manage, and they can release. If you give all that, it's about maybe 5 to 7 people, and give them complete autonomy into a new thing that is not tied to everything, you will see that capacity, that velocity be 10x what your normal company one is. And you think to yourself, okay, well, why is this case? It's because they are detached from all the things that make day-to-day business slow. And so then what you do is you see that as the example case, then you start going, okay, how do we recreate this into every area? And then you start rolling it out. So if you create one model team, which is not a big investment, you will see that this exists, that almost immediately you will see the impact in the team when you give them a lot of autonomy. So I think that's the key. So just to summarize, it's 2 things. You have technical blockers, which you can't get around, and that takes time to invest in. And you have internal blockers, which is mostly built by dependencies. And the way to get around that is to have very autonomous cross-functional teams that you give a lot of responsibility to.
Yeah. And on the autonomous teams, like there are a couple of even frameworks, right? That supports like OKRs, like product teams, however you call it, right? But then I think what's challenging, what you got into it actually, like how to, like, where do you cut this accountability of a team so that they stay autonomous, but still they are, working together, common goal?
I think, whatever it is, it can be OKRs, it can be goals, whatever you want to call it. I guess it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But I think having a very strong strategic statement and direction is like critical. And I think this problem that you're describing is not a problem of team organization, nor is it a problem of goal setting. I think it is a problem of very, very unclear leadership. And so I think this is one of those few things, I would say, where it really is about the leader who is managing multiple teams. And I think strong leaders typically have very clear messages and very singularly focused, and there's not a lot of room for interpretation. And that's actually what most people find useful, is like a very clear answer to every question and a very clear direction for everything. And so having a strong leader who's able to set that and be very disciplined about staying focused on that, that is one of the biggest things. Now, everything else is just practicality, right? Okay, well, are you having enough meetings where everybody's sharing what they're working on? Are the leaders of each of these autonomous groups talking to each other? Are they having their one-on-ones? Are they the right personalities of people that are overshare versus intro? Like just finding that mix. I mean, there's a lot of those things you could massage through, but it really comes down to the person who's managing all of them and their ability to set very strict direction and clarity, and they're able to make those prioritization calls almost on the spot. Because the problem is not people are misaligned. The problem is in day-to-day business, you'll happen to run into decisions where like, should we do X or Y? Should this team go first or should this team go first? And neither team can answer it because they have equal weight in the problem, but they both have their internal needs, right? And that is when like a person goes, it's going to be this. And there's no like magic formula. It comes down to making good decisions repeatedly as a leader. And so that's the problem most people are trying to solve when they experience it. But the reality is it's probably one person who's not being very clear on what they want.
Thanks. So we have also a question from Agnieszka, and she's asking, she's saying Hostelworld Group operates in 180 countries worldwide, according to your website. How do you approach global expansion? How do you structure growth efforts in different markets?
Yeah, there are a lot of countries, of course, but you could probably bucket most of those countries into very similar buckets. So I think the way you want to think about it is not necessarily like nationality or continents. You want to really think about it in terms of user behavior and what is more acceptable experience. So for example, an American person going through an app or a website has slightly different expectations than a person sitting in Singapore or China or Taiwan going through it. Very different expectations. Typically, you can open up probably most apps in America, and the interface will be fairly medium busy, but not very busy, but very clear. But you open any apps in Korea or China, they're like a party. Like there's like a billion animations and there's buttons everywhere and the colors and it's constant. And that is that's almost goes all the way back to having Flash websites. Like in the 2000s, American websites were getting simpler and cleaner, and Korean websites were increasing their file size. There'd be Korean websites that run on Flash that are like 180 meg websites. And that's just like culturally, that's just what people resonate with. And so number one, bucketing that expected user experience into different buckets is just the first way you think about it. We're not a significantly huge company, so we don't have the ability to really optimize perfectly for every market. So what we try to do is take broad brushstrokes, which is the logical way you would approach this. So the way we think of it is, which are the most key markets for us right now, and which are ones that generate the most percentage of revenue, and what do they have in common? So that's, let's say, one bucket of people, and then we make decisions based on that as the priority. So we optimize for that group. Then when we roll it out, I think the key is just to have a process in which you can actually release, let's say, different languages very easily. You can change messaging on different experiences for different targeting and different segments. I think it's not so hard, quote unquote, to globally expand. I think what is the thing that gets in the way is your internal capability to actually press a button and release a new market. That's the challenge. So investing heavily internally to make that process a one-click process, like for yourselves, that's actually the biggest thing most companies don't do, and they struggle to, because every time they launch in the market, they probably do the same 20 things, but they do it every time 20 ways. So what you want to do is just find those processes, build a thing that allows you to do half of those things with a button, and you're able to clone that process over and over and over. That's actually the key to global expansion that makes life easier.
Cool. Like if you could do anything with just one button, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the vision.
There's also a question from Radek, and he's saying, so far we've seen a rebound after COVID with some new, even maybe surprising players joining, like Revolt. 2023, what is your prediction for hospitality tech? Will it be a good year?
I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, I can kind of say what the world seems to feel. But I think when people look at stock markets, when people look at economy, and just general news flow. I think people often forget it's very hard to predict the future, and but often people do. People try to predict the future, and people try to predict their predictions through other predictions, and so it's just like this compounding thing where we all end up with the same opinion eventually. And so I try my best to be very, let's say, independent of that, and just really try to think through what I understand. And the first kind of foundation is you're equally as likely to be very lucky, and you're equally as likely to be very unlucky. And that's like a law of nature. So when you flip a coin, you get two sides. It's equally like opportunistic. You're going to get each. And I think that's how the world kind of looks like as well. And I think this has been drilled into my head because during the last 3 years, there's months where you're just like, well, I didn't expect it to go that well, and it went really well. And there's months where I expected it to go really well, and it went really bad. And because of that, it just shows you like how unstable the world is actually is. And that's not the statement of like our current scenario. It's just life is super unstable and things are very unpredictable. So you got to just believe that's true. Because if you believe that's true, you would think that thinking about the future and planning in detail about the future is painfully disappointing. So doesn't mean you shouldn't have a forward-thinking view of the world. You should just be you want to build that ability to make changes and decide differently as things and new information arises. So I don't know what the world's going to be like. It feels pretty negative across the news flow. I'm more optimistic because every single time people are very negative and the market shows a little bit positivity, everyone's very positive. So I just see all this stuff as quite fickle. And so I don't really think about too much about it. What I do stare at and what I care about is our users and their behavior and their kind of activity. And so far that looks very positive, and we're very happy with where the business is going. So, and that's not to speak for the whole industry. I can only speak for our company, which is, a significant part of the industry, but it doesn't represent the whole travel and hospitality segment. I think there are too many macroeconomic factors that are coming into play that are too hard to peel off. You could have a war, you could not have a war, you could have gas prices go up higher, you could have not, you could have inflation. Like, there's too many factors, and it's impossible to really make decisions based on that. What you can do, and it's the only sane thing to do in my opinion, is just set a vision and focus on getting there as soon as possible, because the real problems that you're trying to solve, they will always exist. But the environment might change, but the problem will always be the same. So if you really obsess over a problem you're trying to solve, you just remove all that noise and just focus on the end goal.
Sounds very down to earth. Listen, I don't know if you realize, but we're just 6 minutes left. Yeah, it's going quite quickly. So I have last question for you, and this is the question that we are asking all the speakers, and it's another question about predicting the future. So I don't know how much.
All right.
But maybe not about predicting the future, but about the magic abilities. So it's about the magic wand. So if you had a magic wand and you could cast one spell that allowed you to provide education on a specific topic to all 12-year-olds in the world, what would it be? What would you like those folks to learn?
12-year-olds. That's such a specific age. That's like
exactly 12. Yeah.
12 years old is just imagining what a 12-year-old is like. I think a 12-year-old is very, very formed as a like, they have very strong opinions, or they have a personality. Like, they have a lot of they have a lot of opinions, preferences. It's all there, right? So I'm just thinking, okay, yeah, I think there's a very clear answer. I think as a 12-year-old, I'd imagine that you have very limited amount, but you think it's infinite amount of knowledge, which is common. Actually, it's everyone in every age of their life. They always think they know a lot more than they actually know. The thing is, most of that by 12 is preference and nurture. It's what you grew up with and what you think you like. So what you think you like is true. And I think the thing that always helps in every part of life is having an ability to objectively analyze things without your personal preference layering on top just yet. I think you should always add your opinion, but that comes a little later. So I think we value too much, in my opinion, in education. We value too much about academic achievement, and we don't value enough about practical implementation of those skills, and then getting people to be excited about something. The perfect example is me. I've in my entire life, in high school, in college, everything. You can look at my SAT scores. You can see my grades. I've always a fairly mediocre person. B minus, maybe B, potentially B pluses sometimes if I'm lucky. I had I think a 999 on my SAT. This is in 90s, so the scale is different, but that would be probably the most average human like ever. You can go to college, but just barely. So I didn't go to a fancy school. I don't have an MBA. I never studied business. Never took an engineering class. In reality, I went to a blue collar kind of work for artists. I learned how to draw. I was a technical person. So, and I think the reason why I say that is because there was just a very specific moment where I looked at something, I was working on something, and none of it felt foreign and all of it felt familiar. So I look at numbers, I look at data, and I'm just like, oh, I understand what's going on. My logic, it just clicks. And you're just like, why? And how is it that I can go through close to 25 years of my life being very like, oh, math is very hard and scary and grammar's hard and all this stuff. But math became so easy and so natural as soon as I applied it to a problem I was trying to solve in a business context. Then it was just like, it just clicked. And in terms of grammar, I'm a terrible writer. I don't have great grammar. My vocabulary is pretty low. But the moment I start working on presentations and I start telling stories and start talking the way I want to talk, I realize I'm great at actually framing a story and I'm great at writing. It just like I have to write it in my voice. But I was never taught that. I was always taught that you had to do it in this way. And so I realized the majority of things that people are actually good at, they're told they're not good at it because they're taught to do it in a different way. And if I were to like just magically want to change everything, I wish every 12-year-old could try everything in every way to see what really resonates. Because it is not that you're bad at learning X or you're not familiar with Y. It's just that sometimes you just haven't found the right context to apply it to. And once you do, you realize you're actually very good at it. And I think the majority of humans in the world, they go through life without knowing those things. And I think that's very disappointing. And that just really blocks so much human potential. I'm the most random lucky case of that, where I found something that made all those things feel comfortable. But I mean, we're talking my entire adult life. I never knew I was even able to calculate things and to look at data, to understand this stuff. And now it feels so obvious every time I look at it. So I think everyone has that capability inside of them. I think we just do a very bad job of siloing people to only learn things in a certain way. And I think application of a variety of different problems with the same fundamentals create the most positive impact in the world. So I think that's what I would do. I would unlock the ability for kids to really overthink about academically how they're performing and think about how they can apply it to a real world problem in front of them. And they will learn that that's actually an infinite application and they can create endless value for the world like that.
I'm super glad that I asked this question.
Okay.
Johnny, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the hour that you spent with us, for all the answer that you got for us. Like, it's super inspirational to hear that all. Thank you for sharing your stories, your knowledge, your experience, how you managed to do it all together. And thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paula. And thank you for everyone who asked questions. Sorry I didn't get to answer all of them. I hope you guys had a nice time, and I hope I talk to you guys soon again.
Me too. Thanks everybody who joined. Again, thanks for the questions, and see you in the next episode of Disruption Talks.
See you guys. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.